I came across the phrase, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy on probably Twitter maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it was kind of this meme that was rolling around, and it was attributed to the World Economic Forum, which I happen to know as a group that is littered with the business and political elite. You may hear about them getting together in Davos, Switzerland every year to, kiss each other's behinds and tell them how smart they are and eat some caviar and whatnot. And so when I first saw this, as I often do on social media, I just kind of figured it was taken out of context, right? Because there's no way that the people who understand wealth creation would be advocating for the end of private property, let alone by 2030. And as somebody with my background who has been advocating for wealth creation opportunities for everybody for more than a quarter of a century, the one thing I know above everything else is that wealth comes from ownership. You have to own assets in particular that can either be stores of value or hopefully appreciate in value. And that's how people create wealth. So this idea that, the number one prediction from the World Economic Forum's 8 predictions for 2030 is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy seemed really crazy to me. And then you started to part and parcel it. And, the first part is you'll own nothing. Very clear that it was not will own nothing, that the people who are making the prediction clearly were not including themselves in that prediction, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the second part is the you'll be happy part. And so if you think about throughout history, the people who have not owned property, that haven't had their property rights protected, who haven't had that opportunity to participate in society as an owner, have not only been unfree, but have been unhappy. Many of them have starved to death until lost their lives. So it's interesting to me that it seems like there's sort of this psyop going on to try to get people to buy into the convenience. And wouldn't it be great to not have to worry about anything? Because the people who ostensibly want you to own nothing,
they wouldn't buy into it. They would just rent it, right?
Exactly. Very well played. Right, exactly. They would rent into the idea so that they don't have to force it upon you. Very well done.
Well, yeah. So again, folks, as Carol's saying there, I had the exact same experience, Carol, that, there's lots of, Alex Jones things and whatever. And, surprisingly, a lot of some of the stuff he said did come true. But when I saw the you will own nothing and be happy, and they were attributing it to either they said W.E.F. or sometimes they said Klaus Schwab in particular. And like you said, I thought either that's got to be a paraphrase of something that's some gobbledygook, whatever. And no, it was literally their own video that had it. They took it down, I believe, after the
it's still on their X, formerly known as Twitter stream. You can see the video.
Okay, all right, yeah,
because I did a screenshot from it yesterday. So as of yesterday,
okay, great.
It was still up there. And by the way, people only get to the first prediction. The second prediction is that the U.S. will no longer be the world's leading superpower, which is also incredibly frightening. But people are so up in arms over the first one, they never really make it to the other 7, which are equally as bad.
Yes, yeah. So for people at home who still think, come on, what they mean, folks, is their vision is people living in this tiny little dwelling, jam-packed like sardines into an apartment unit because they've got their virtual reality goggles, because it conserves, to reduce their footprint on Mother Earth. And that you don't need to own cars. There can just be, flying cars that are sort of like Uber. And so it's like this world, this future where a few billionaires own everything and robots do a lot of the work and all that stuff. And everybody just rents flows of services because their real income is so high because of automation and whatnot. So that's also too, Kara, I don't know if you get into this in your book, where a lot of these leading billionaires now are in favor of UBI, universal basic income, because, all these people aren't going to have. So it really is this vision where a lot of humanity is just going to be cattle with VRs strapped on, plugged in and into the metaverse, and that's why they don't care so much about the fact that they're living in a 10 by 10 apartment and don't own it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really almost the scene. I don't know if you ever read or saw the movie of Ready Player One, but that's, sort of the vision of it. Like you said, is, everybody's kind of in this fake reality that they've constructed to create their own happiness because the world around them has become so bleak. And if you think about the incredible progress and prosperity that we have made in a very short period of time because of the protection of property rights, because of technologies that allowed people to continue to trade with each other, this vision is very much a step backwards. It's almost like a new dark ages and a very frightening proclamation from people who really have benefited from that and seen other people benefiting. It's a very different vision than, say, like a Henry Ford who wanted to dominate his domain, but also wanted to pay his workers enough to make sure that they had the prosperity to be able to buy the cars that he was producing. This is a very different take, and they use a lot of fear and catastrophizing and scare tactics. But one of the reasons, Bob, that I really think this is all going on is because of the shifting of the global financial order. And I think that most people don't realize that, the US has only been in this position for about 80 years. And before us, it was the British, and before the British, it was the Dutch. And so this is something that happens on a regular basis. And we're seeing the rhyme in terms of the US debt loads and the deficits they're running, the potential weakening of the military. The US is standing on the global stage and some of the decisions that are being made. And so I think that these wealthy people, the people who are connected, who are students of history and have this power and wealth, they see that the order is changing. And so if you see that's changing, you have two choices. You can sit back and just hope and pray that it works out for you, or you can proactively try to control the outcome. And I really think that second part, which is very much just human nature, is what's happening. And it really takes a lot of the conspiracy theory elements out of it because, by the way, President Biden has talked about this, in a speech in front of the Business Roundtable, March 21st of 2022. That's, you can find it either on YouTube or on the White House's website.
Yeah, again, with this stuff, I think it sounds like you and I have similar takes on this and how we're trying to communicate it to a broader audience that, like, hey, I know this sounds crazy, but they're like the World Economic Forum, I forget the exact title, but it was like Forum for Establishing Standards in Global Governance or something like that, where they're almost literally, when you read the blurb, trying to establish a one world government. And they have government officials from around the world coming in, and they almost have like seminars about this is how you do blah, blah, blah in your countries. And because look at this model over here and look at, and they're all converging. So they're not literally handing over sovereignty at these conferences, but they are all copying this model. And I'm sure you've seen, Carol, too, Klaus Schwab bragging about how the graduates of his young leadership program have penetrated, and that was the verb he used, penetrated the cabinets of governments around the world. I mean, that's not just, hey, we're putting out a blueprint here and people are, persuaded voluntarily by the benefits of it and they go and follow it like it's a diet program. Like he said that our people are penetrating cabinets around the world.
Yes, and let's just underscore this because part of what I did in You Will Own Nothing is I sourced everything. This has more than 600 sources in there. So a lot of it's mainstream media, a lot of it's from the horse's mouth. Again, you can find this clip on YouTube. It was Klaus Schwab speaking at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and that is what he said. Then we penetrate the cabinets. It came straight out of his mouth. And again, I'm always thinking about as somebody who's in the media, who's somebody who's taken out of context from time to time, like, was there another context? Like, there's no other context when you talk about we raise these leaders and then we penetrate the cabinets. I can't, like, I'm good at thinking about other scenarios. I don't know about you, Bob. Like, is there any other scenario that penetrating the cabinets could possibly mean?
Well, and he says that in English too, right? You know what I mean? Because like one thing could be if he was saying it in German, or he also was fluent in French, and maybe the subtitle was a little off, or something. But no, he's openly saying it. And like you say, when you see the before and the after the clip and how they're all jocular, like that is, it means what it sounds like. He's not, it's not something else. And in his mind, I try to get in the minds of these people. I think you're right. I think one thing is, because if you're at that level of wealth and like, your family from a young age, you've been just jet setting around the world and going, like, they don't have any allegiance to a particular country. Like, I think they view that as sort of some backward, silly thing from the 1800s where people cared about what country they were from. And this is a global community and and if it's more efficient to do it our way, because there are a lot of smart people involved. Klaus Schwab, I think, has 2 PhDs, like in economics and engineering. He's just a smart guy. So I can see why they would think, look at how the world is run. This is kind of silly. There's a lot of needless suffering. And if people just let us take over, it would be a lot better for everybody.
Yeah, it's nice that you're giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Making him Darth Vader, basically.
I just think he's a communist who's been trying to push communism by wrapping it up in a bow in a different way. And he's, by the way, been doing this since 1971. As part of my research, I went back to the origins of the WEF. It started as the European Management Forum, and it coincided in 1971 with the publishing of Klaus Schwab's book, where he talks about this idea of stakeholder capitalism, which is a weasel word that he's, by the way, a very persistent man. He's been doing this for more than 50 years. And it's a very clever on his side, but nefarious phrasing. So getting back to the concept of ownership, which I think your audience will really understand, when you are an owner of something, you have skin in the game. You have taken some level of risk and you would put some of yourself into something in order to have that benefit. So if you own, for example, stock in a company, you've got that because you have worked hard and you have your blood, sweat, and tears, and you've gotten some options or some equity, or you've made income elsewhere and you've risked that capital in order to take a stake in a company and hope that it works out for you. So you have that risk. And that's what a shareholder is. And in my mind, that's an actual stakeholder. They have an actual stake in what's going on. This nonsense word of stakeholder is, I'm somebody who doesn't take any risk. I have no real input, no skin in the game that I've invested, but I still want to influence the outcome and I still want to benefit from it. And that is sort of the communist way. It's the people at the top, want everyone else to do the work and for them not to benefit. And, by proxy, the people at the top benefit. So when they keep talking about all of these crazy concepts that fall around being a stakeholder, particularly something like ESG, which I imagine is coming up a lot in your world, this is what's at the core of it. And this is not a new endeavor. It may have a new packaging, but he's been pushing this concept since 1971.
Yeah, exactly. And he was, when I did a deep dive on that stuff too, like he was like taken under Henry Kissinger's wing way back in the day. And, so he's definitely very interventionist and like a global crusader for various causes that I think a lot of our audience, and certainly it sounds like where you're coming from, would be things anathema to us.
And I think it's also bears saying that not everybody involved is like sitting around a table with Klaus Schwab, like, an evil cabal with Dr. Evil at the middle of it. I think there are a lot of people that derive other benefits or at least feel like it gives them some cover to be associated, don't really understand what's going on, don't realize that they're being the useful idiots that are carrying back some of the ideas. I don't think that everybody who happens to be affiliated with this organization in some way, going to Davos or whatever, is a bad person or even has a clue as to what's happening. But unfortunately, they are being used as conduits to push this information back and these ideas back in ways that are very damaging, even though they may not be able to see that damage is being caused.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol, for making that clarification, because you're right. Sometimes I think it does come off like I'm postulating that there's this network of 30,000 people who are all like, and that's not it. And certainly, too, like a lot of people, too, that are genuinely worried about climate change and things like I can understand, like, oh, look at these people are doing something about it and they have the scientists involved and that. What's interesting, too, Carol, is you were talking about the whole stakeholder. And do you agree? I think they use that term stakeholder as a foil to shareholder. Like they're saying, oh, no, it's not just the shareholders. There are others, people like labor and
they're conflating the issues. And I do think employees are actual stakeholders. I do think customers are actual stakeholders. I don't think random climate justice people are stakeholders. So, when you're a business, you have to understand who's actually has that vested interest, that risk. And I mean, that's your whole business, right? Is assessing risk. You get compensated for taking on risk. These people have no risk. And that is the differentiation, but they're trying to conflate and confuse the two in order to use these companies, to really bully these companies to push their agendas, Bob, in a way that gets around traditional legislative processes. And that is incredibly nefarious and deliberate.
Yeah. And also, too, I don't believe them because, like, I unfortunately, I don't really have the statistics in my hand, but a couple of years ago, I then and looked at the attendees at these events and whatever. And even though they may make it sound like, oh, we have equal representation from indigenous peoples and labor unions and this. No, most of the people at this thing were high-level executives from banks and oil companies and media. You know what I mean? Like, it was, even though technically they were making it look like we're hearing from everybody, it was the people that fly to Davos or whatever. It's not somebody,
It's
from a
you'll
traditional
own
thing in Alaska.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, not will own nothing. And that's the other thing too, is a lot of times that, they'll tell us, oh, we're in this climate emergency. And nobody is acting like they're in a climate emergency. They're buying up waterfront property. They're flying on their private planes. They're
Yeah.
eating the meat that they're trying to eliminate. So from my perspective, if you want to at least sell me or try to make me believe in this emergency, you can at least play along, right? Like, you can at least pretend for a few minutes. And the fact that they're not even willing to pretend, I think, tells you everything that you need to know.
Yes. Yes.
Hey, everybody, this is Bob Murphy. Thanks for listening to this clip from the Infi podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing and share this video with others. We've got new episodes dropping every Friday with more insightful discussions. Stay tuned.